Today I'm choosing a new team to coach and I have offers from college and NFL teams, but first, how did I get here? 14 years ago, I started my coaching career as an offensive coordinator at New Mexico, and after 2 successful seasons there, Nick Saban brought me to Alabama, which led to me getting my first head coaching job at Louisville. After being there for 6 seasons, I finally brought the Ville a national championship, and that led to UCLA throwing a bag at me. For $80 million over 5 years, I became their head coach, and we are coming off back-to-back national championships. However, I'm ready for a change of scenery, and the 3 teams I've narrowed it down to are Kentucky, the Steelers, and the Packers. With the Lions coming off of a Super Bowl win, I feel like Green Bay will be a tough challenge, but they offered me $18 million a year, so I couldn't say no. After taking a look at the team though, it was clear we needed to make some moves, so after I coach in my first NFL game ever, I'll be working on a huge trade. And by the way, I need to have a great season here in Green Bay because I said we're making the playoffs. We ended up starting off down 13, but by the fourth quarter, we had a chance to tie it up, and this should have been held on to. However, instead of scoring, we would fail to even get 3 out of the drive, and after watching miserable quarterback play for 4 quarters, I was ready to change things up. So I traded for Trevor Lawrence, and even though he was 38 years old, he was still playing at a very high level. To open up the second quarter, he found Larry Leak in the back of the Texans' end zone, and he was consistently threading the needle to find his new favorite target. With about 3 minutes left, we were trailing Houston by 3, but we had a chance to go down the field and win it, so Trevor Lawrence continued to deliver the ball right where he needed to, and I was really enjoying coaching him as he ran my plays to perfection. With 1 second left, he threw the game-winning touchdown, and our path to the playoffs began now, so I had to add more talent to the line. I was hoping we could go out and beat the Panthers, and even though the year was 2038, they still weren't very good at football. T-Law appreciated that as he would find Zaire White for back-to-back touchdowns, and to end the first half, Larry Leak fought his hardest to make it into the end zone. With Trevor Lawrence and a new right guard, my offense was humming all day at Lambeau Field, and he threw for 435 yards, so I let the media know we were going to keep passing. We had to play at Minnesota next, and this was a huge game for us if we wanted to win the NFC North this season. In all honesty, this was one of Trevor's worst showings as he threw 2 interceptions in the first half, and he clearly just wasn't in the right headspace today. He threw another one midway through the third quarter, and unfortunately, the Vikings cornerback would take it all the way back to the house for 6, and you can only imagine that I was not happy at all with him. I also learned that I needed to get a new kicker since ours couldn't hit from 56, so I immediately signed Ryan Bowles, and I saw we were still tied for first in the division, so I'm confident we can still win the NFC North. I'm not gonna lie though, the Dolphins are giving us a very tough game today, and all I knew to do as a coach was just call plays where Trevor Lawrence could continue to sling it. Fortunately, my defense came up clutch for us as they forced a fumble before Miami was able to score, and Brian Craig would end our following drive with 6. From there, we were able to hang on to our lead against the Dolphins, so we were now 3-2, and as T-Law and Larry Leak continued to hook up, everyone saw their special connection. In all honesty, our game against the Saints was pretty boring for most of it, but with 3 minutes left, they were trying to come back, and all of a sudden, we went from dominating all day to being in trouble. It would all come down to if the defense could lock up one more time and get a stop, which fortunately, with this pass sailing out of bounds, they were able to do. I'd gotten the Packers into the top 5 of the NFL, and the fans were loving me so far. I was starting to feel like I could coach this team to the Super Bowl in my first year in the NFL, but maybe not, because we just can't seem to beat the Vikings. We were trailing by 2 possessions until this laser from T-Law, and I swore that our corner got both of his feet down on this goal line interception, so I threw the challenge flag, and it wasn't successful, but at least we held them to just 3. It gave us a chance to stay in the game and potentially pull off the comeback, especially since Trevor Lawrence thread the needle to Bradley Alley with 3.5 minutes remaining. After that, we forced Minnesota to a 3-and-out, and once I saw tight end Sherrod Thompson pull off this ridiculous one-handed grab, I knew we would win. Ryan Bowles put us up with this field goal, and on the other side of the ball, our defense secured the comeback win. At this point, we had really turned around our season, so I was hoping I could continue to coach us to wins, and on this play, I was about to lose it on Trevor Lawrence for throwing it, but Larry Leak somehow came down with it, and even though we lost to them the first time this year, we took down the Bears. It wasn't even close, and all of my receivers were determined to keep putting up crazy numbers. Defensively, I thought my guys were honestly crushing it, and we were, until today against the Bills. However, every good team has their off games throughout the year, so I don't think this result is the end of the world because we're still leading the NFC North. Coming up now though, I have to coach coach in a very important matchup, which is against the reigning Super Bowl champions, and currently Trevor Lawrence has the 7th best odds to win the MVP race, so since my defense isn't doing a good job of stopping Detroit today, he'll need a breakout performance, which would help his MVP chances if he played well. Unfortunately though, by the end of the third quarter, my guys were trailing the Lions by 17 points, so the comeback needed to start now or else we would lose. We came so close to getting a stop on defense, but ultimately Madden scripting took over, so now we were on a losing streak, and if I wanted to make the Super Bowl, I'd have to turn it around. Two teams that don't have to worry about that are the Chiefs and the Eagles, and if you want to add even more fun to tomorrow night, I'd recommend getting Prize Picks, the sponsor of today's video, since all Patrick Mahomes has to do is pass for over half a yard for you to win on this free square that can go in any of your entries. It's a great way to get started over there, and code BOARD or the first link in my description will double your initial deposit up to $100. It's available to play in over 30 states. They have almost every sport you can think of, and time is ticking before the big game starts, so make sure to sign up using code BOARD. And now let's get through the rest of the season. We had to start winning again to get locked into the playoffs, and I was hoping the Jets were still a below average team in this franchise. 38-year-old Trevor Lawrence still ran like he was 20, but we were losing going into the fourth quarter, so it's a good thing we got to finally see him whip out his cannon in front of everybody. It was huge as he dropped a 65-yard bomb on the money, and that seemed like it would be the difference maker, but on a third down that would have sealed the game, T-Law failed to lead his receiver, so now it was all in the hands of my defense, and it looked like the Jets were going to find a way to get in field goal range, but what happened was even worse than that as they scored a touchdown with 10 seconds remaining and we lost another game. All of a sudden, it seemed like making the playoffs was potentially on the line, and it didn't help that our starting halfback was out. It was going to be hard to bounce back at this point, but if we were going to, we would need to close out this game, and after linebacker Greg Pippen railed the Falcons defender, my team would take it back to the house, giving us a 2-possession lead, which would end up resulting in a win. We were back and currently on pace to make the playoffs, but I wanted to make sure my team finished our last 5 regular season games with wins, so I brought out some new plays that nobody had ever seen and I had never called before. That allowed us to leave Tampa Bay on top of the Bucs, and I was always a pretty aggressive head coach, but against the Los Angeles Rams, I took it up to another level as I called a play every single time we got stuck in a 4th down situation. Due to that, we were able to stay in the game when we might have otherwise not been able to, and we were even in a pretty good position with just 2.5 minutes remaining. All we had to do was finish running out the clock on the Rams, and with one last aggressive 4th down play call, my team sealed the game, which kept us tied for first in the NFC North. If we could beat the Lions today, we would most likely win the division, but nothing was going our way, like this not being ruled a catch by Sherrod Thompson. However, I challenged it anyway, and the refs actually overturned it, so that completely changed the game for us as we would end the first half going up by 4 points. With 2 minutes remaining, we had maintained that same lead, and I decided to call a blitz to try and pick up a stop. It couldn't have gone more perfectly for us, and my aggression as a coach continued to be the key to our success. The following week in Philadelphia, though, we got a wake-up call as we got off to an atrocious start, falling behind by 28 points, and like you'd expect, there was no recovering from that, so we just had to make sure it didn't happen again. Our last regular season game was against the Patriots, and we got on the board first, which was important since it seemed like it would be a high-scoring game. I was correct about that as we combined for 56 points, but luckily we ended up having more in the end, and I was just ready to coach in my first playoff game ever. Trevor Lawrence finished with some insane numbers, and it wouldn't have been possible without this receiving core. I also guaranteed the fans a win, so I was thrilled that my defense forced an interception just a few minutes into the game because it led to Trevor Lawrence getting us into the end zone and on the board first. He was dissecting the Panthers defense as he found Larry Leak for 6 on the next drive, but unfortunately by the end of the first half it was a tie game, so I had to give a motivational halftime speech, and wide receiver Zaire White clearly took it to heart. He started the third quarter with a 61-yard touchdown, and I wish it would have inspired my defense to perform better, but it did not. We were heading into the fourth trailing the Panthers by 4 points, and that's when we got the lucky break that we needed. The Carolina quarterback had some miscommunication with his receiver. Cornerback Courtney Palmer was in the right position, and the rest is history as he outran everybody to take it back for 6. However, it inspired my other players that weren't as good to play a little more aggressively and almost instantly we would pay for that as we fell back down 4. From there, I was hoping that we could finish the game by going down the field and scoring with no time remaining, but I got worried that we were moving a little bit too fast because just like it was in college, my offense was still very explosive. With a minute left, Trevor Lawrence and Zaire White hooked up again, and then 38-year-old T-Law took off and made sure that nobody was stopping him from making it into the end zone. The Panthers still had 27 seconds and 3 timeouts though, and it was clearly far from over. They would send it to overtime here, but we got the ball first, and for some reason I thought it would be an easy win from there, but all of a sudden we were stuck on 4th down, and even though Trevor Lawrence got drilled almost immediately, he escaped, and I thought he was going to save us, but he just couldn't make the throw. My first year coaching in the NFL ended up finishing with a wildcard loss at home where we should have won, and I was devastated.